JayEmm on Cars is sponsored by Car Vertical. With just a registration number, or even better, a VIN, Car Vertical will search over 20 European databases to find out whether any car you're looking at has a hidden past. They can see if a vehicle was used as a taxi, stolen, suffered fire damage, or involved in a crash, even when it wasn't written off, so could pass other checks. Car Vertical is now an essential tool in my car buying kit, putting all the information I need to know together in one easy-to-read report. Even better, if you follow the link in the description down below, you'll get 10% off. A big thank you to them for being today's sponsor.
Hello everybody! Believe it or not, I really do relish every chance that I get to drive a McLaren. I am more than aware that I'm famed for being that guy that hates McLaren, but I don't think I've yet driven one of their cars and not liked it. And today I'm driving one that I've somehow managed to miss over the last few years. I have actually driven a 650S in the past, but it was a very long time ago and it wasn't on the channel. I've been very keen to get behind the wheel of one of these for a long time because I think if you are in the market for not just a McLaren but a supercar, this could be one of the best options out there. Now, up until the market went absolutely bonkers a few months ago, you could pick up a 650S from about £80,000, of course with the coupes being the cheaper and the Spider being a little bit more expensive. And for very, very many reasons, these do seem like the sweet spot in the McLaren lineup. When the 12C was introduced, it was really a genuinely revelatory product and one that I've really quite warmed to over the last few years. However, it wasn't a car without fault, and I was lucky enough, courtesy of my friend Michael, to spend quite a bit of time in one recently, a few days in fact. I really did enjoy the car and its astonishing all-round ability, being both very comfortable, excellent at touring and travelling long distances, but also utterly and totally devastating when you wanted to get down a back road in a hurry. The 12C though did have many failings, early ones in particular. Even the door handles didn't work very well because they had this weird little swipe thing. The Iris Mark 1 infotainment wasn't very good. Build quality was a touch on the dubious side, and the styling isn't to everyone's tastes. The styling actually has grown on me quite a bit over the last few years, to the point where I now think actually it's one of McLaren's best looking cars. But the 650 for many was the one. In general terms, this is a 12C, and for a little while McLaren tried to convince everybody that this wasn't a 12C replacement. However, as soon as this was announced, nearly everybody that had a 12C order cancelled it, so this wound up becoming the 12C replacement. It was a little bit more expensive but had a huge raft of upgrades, some minor, some not so minor. The headline figures were a power increase from the 620 odd horses of the late 12Cs up to 650, hence the name. Torque also went up by quite a bit, from 440 pound-foot to 500. That's a lot. You also had detail improvements to the suspension, to the gearbox, to the interior, to the infotainment, to just about everything. This wasn't really an all-new model, but it was a facelifted 12C, and that really is what we needed. Build quality also seemed to be somewhat improved, and history tells us this is more or less one of the best put-together McLarens to date. The 675LT will, I think, for a long time be the most desirable car to come from Woking in recent times that mortals can actually ever have a hope of affording, but these are pretty dang close. And in some ways, I actually prefer the look of the 650 over the 675, because those have a lot of things sprouting out of them, and I think they lose a little bit of the elegance of this car. From behind, you'd be hard-pressed to tell whether you are following a 12C or a 650. The front is the most obvious because it's got that P1-looking nose, and the side does have a couple of changes, so the way the intake works is a little bit different to 12C. However, the difference is subtle, so at a quick glance, you'd be forgiven for mistaking the two. On the interior, again, it's much the same as the older car. Same beautiful, small, thin-rimmed steering wheel, the same gorgeous, flowing layout, the same slightly frustrating Iris infotainment. I've never actually had the misfortune of using Iris 1 because the 12C I drove had the upgrade in it, but it's not a brilliant system, it has to be said. One area that's certainly improved over the 12C is the gearbox. It's a 7-speed item made by Graziano, and McLaren call it the Seamless Shift Gearbox, the SSG. It's a dual clutch to anyone else. The 12C, when you were not on it, was rather slow to change, but this, even at normal speed, seems just that little bit more responsive, and that's very nice because it fixes perhaps the biggest problem I had with the 12C. That was a car that you couldn't drive slow fast. This is a car with such unbelievable performance that it's very, very easy to go daft quick in it without much effort at all, and it makes it really a very pleasurable thing too. Some cars are very, very quick but not that enjoyable, others are very enjoyable but not that quick. This really is a bit of both. And it is savagely fast, this thing. That wasn't even asking everything it could give. In fact, I changed it up at about 6,000 RPM. The red line here is a very impressive 8.5. These cars never sounded the best, and that is something this shares also with the 12C, unsurprisingly, considering the engine is still fundamentally the same. There were quite a few changes made to it internally so it can cope better with the extra torque in particular, but it's still a fine thing when on the boil. It even cracks and pops. But off boost, it's got nothing. A bit like my old 944 Turbo, really. Get it to just over 3,500 RPM though, and it changes completely. This car also has the 12C's sort of supernatural ride, and if anything, I would actually say this could be a touch more comfortable. I may be mistaken there, but I've currently got this in its active mode, so if you want to use all the different driving modes, you have to enable the active panel down here. You've got a choice of 3 settings for the handling and the powertrain. Powertrain I have in sport presently, handling I have in normal, because for the road, honestly, that's where you want to be. It genuinely is a brilliant car, soaks up the lumps and bumps so well. Visibility also absolutely brilliant. I've driven up here this morning in the new Toyota Supra, and that is absolutely atrocious. You feel really cramped, somewhat claustrophobic. It feels like the windscreen's a mile away from you and you've got only the tiniest view of the road. Here you're sat on the tarmac and the car, as big as it might be, just melts away under you. I remember the very first time I ever drove a McLaren, I was absolutely terrified of the thing. I was driving it on behalf of somebody else. I didn't have the experience that I do now with these things. And yet after only a few minutes, you had complete confidence, not just in the car's ability, but also in its size. You could get it through the narrowest of gaps, no worry at all. I love that big single wiper. Don't know why it's activated itself. So let's treat ourselves to a little bit of second gear. Alive. Like that Toyota Supra, that's quick, but this is just exhilarating. It's a whole nother level of excitement, of driving feel, and of sheer unabashed speed. This thing is phenomenal. I mean, really, honestly, a lot of supercars, especially older ones, don't maybe live up to the hype anymore. My 430 Scuderia is quick, for sure. But compared to a lot of modern stuff, say even like a Nissan GTR, it's not really that fast. This is one of the very rare examples of a supercar that is actually, in the real world, that fast. Yeah. I absolutely adore this thing. Steering is quick and actually also improved over the 12C too. That was another weakness of that car. I was shocked because McLaren steering is some of the best in the business, but the 12Cs just had a little bit of deadness about it. This, much, much better. McLaren always have had hydraulic racks because they believe it gives you the best steering feel, and this is proof that that is true. Picks up the camber quite happily, sniffs it out. Jesus wept. You know those fairground rides where you get strapped into like a ping pong ball Faraday cage kind of thing, and you're in what's essentially a gigantic slingshot? That's what this is. You sit in it and you go, you know what? I want to be over there. And then you are. Now, in the last few years, we've seen the prices of a lot of McLarens fall generally quite a bit, and a lot of the models are now all sort of mixed up in the used car market. So we're at a point now where a 570 and a 12C and a 650 are all kind of fighting for the same sort of space, really. A lot of people I know prefer the 570s, and there are many reasons for that. Some just want the newer car, some think it'll be more reliable, some people think it's the more exciting thing to drive. To me, no. If you want the McLaren experience, you want one of these. Grip is also phenomenal, by the way. McLaren never really fitted a traditional differential to these, always had an open diff and used the electronics, and on the road I've never really found that to be a problem. Nothing can reel in traffic like a McLaren, not with this amount of ease. And Nissan GT-R would be doing the same speed, but it would be beating me to bits with its ride quality. It really would. This though, nah, Rolls Ride Saturn V performance. Anyway, the 570 is a very, very fine thing, but I think one of the reasons that these depreciated so hard, along with the 12Cs, and have become somewhat less desirable in the used car market, is because McLaren dealers spent a very, very long time putting people off. I have been to a McLaren dealer where a friend was looking at buying a car and he was told point blank, don't buy a 650, they'll break and they'll cost you loads more even if they don't, compared to a 570. Now, I'm sure that had nothing to do with the fact that said dealer didn't have a 650 to sell, and he did have a lot of 570s he needed to shift. But that's not a very helpful attitude. In fact, in the recent years, I've often thought about buying a 650S. Not actually been able to act upon it very often, but when I did get to the point where I could, I went to McLaren because I would like to have bought an approved used car. I do prefer that. McLaren Finance was probably the easiest way I was going to be able to get something like this. And the McLaren Warranty is also a very nice thing to have. So this car's owner got it with McLaren Warranty, and he has needed it. He came from an Alfa Romeo 4C, something he really, really enjoyed, but thought that maybe he'd never be able to afford a supercar, and then found himself in the lucky position where this was attainable. He got it earlier in the year and prices were a little bit softer, and if anything, he will have actually made money on this car. So good choice, good call. In the 6 months that he's had this car, it's had a coolant leak fixed, it's had the rear lights replaced due to the very common condensation issue, and he's also had all four corners of the suspension replaced as well because the actuators failed. Very common McLaren thing. It's about £1,000 a corner, and your warranty may be about £5 a year, but with all that work done, it has paid for itself. If you wanted to spend a little bit less, you could get a thorny warranty, but it won't be quite as comprehensive as the genuine McLaren one. It does pay for most things, however there is an upper claim limit. In practice, it should cover nearly everything that does tend to go wrong with one of these. The only thing it wouldn't cover really is the engine, but engine failures in these are almost unheard of. As it's his first supercar, I was keen to find out how James has found it, and he's absolutely loved it. He drives it on high days and holidays, takes it out at weekends, and he really enjoys sharing his car. Like me, one of his favourite things with this car is sharing the experience, so I'm very grateful to him for letting me take his car out today and have a bit of fun in it. Being a Spider 2, you actually get unusually even more boot space in some ways than you would with the Coupe, because when the roof is up, you got a little bit of space under the tonneau cover at the back as well, like in the 12C. It's not huge, but if you're doing a big journey, you can get a couple of soft bags in there, which is helpful if you're going away for a little while. The front boot is also a good size and is currently filled with water skiing equipment. Because why not? If I water skied and had a McLaren, I would take my McLaren water skiing as well. It's also a car too where, when we do get stuck in a bit of traffic, including a beautiful purple classic Mini, I'm not that worried, I'm not that upset. Something like the Scuderia, I'd probably be getting itchy feet right about now. I'd be sort of working out how to get past. Incidentally, the left pedal will operate brakes that here in the 650 are carbon ceramics as standard. And they're brilliant, really nice to use, exactly the right amount of pressure required to operate them. They are sensational. The good people at McLaren really did know how to design a car that appeals to the enthusiast. Perhaps the biggest shame with a car like this is that I've known a lot of people, women in particular, I'll be honest, who are somewhat put off by it. Maybe it's the mid-engine supercar bit. They just find it a little bit daunting, and they prefer often to drive something like a Ferrari Portofino. The fact is that actually a Ferrari Portofino is a much more difficult car to drive. It's much bigger, harder to place, and has a lot less traction. The McLaren is one of the friendliest supercars you will ever encounter. If you stick it around into sport or track mode, the suspension will firm up, and I'd say, yeah, probably in sport mode, maybe about equivalent to my car, the 430, in soft. And then put it in normal, it's fabulous. Really, really wonderful. Love the colour of that little Mini. It's almost a TVR kind of reflexy paint. It's not, but it's got a purple, bit of blue in it. Lovely little thing. Let's see what the tiny circle's like. Oh, it's crap. There were a lot of options you could specify with these cars. They include a lot of carbon bits. This has the exposed carbon side sills, which are nice, although I'd be permanently terrified about somebody scratching one, particularly if you have passengers with high heels. This has the carbon wing at the back. Got a few little bits as well. We reckon this has got about £30,000 worth of stuff in it. It's unusual also to see a 650 with leather inside, because for this model, Alcantara became really the default choice. Put your foot down a little bit, that air brake at the back pops up. It's so full of drama, this car. Yeah, there's just a moment of turbo lag, but when you're on it, not anywhere near enough to be worried about. Like the 12C, it seems to go up in stages, the rev counter. It's very odd. Whether it's just fighting for grip or not, I'm not sure, but it doesn't feel like it. This doesn't maybe quite have the tactility and the drama of my 430, but then it's not designed to. That would be the 675 LT, but it is just unbelievably all-round capable. It's a warm day today, 19 degrees, so it's not roasting hot. There's not too much wind noise in the cabin either. And having done many hundreds of miles now in a 12C, that's a daily drivable supercar. These are without equal. Even the Ferrari F8, much stiffer than this. The Spider, very wobbly, unforgivably so, you could say. But this does the business. It really does. And to me, well worth the extra sort of £20,000 premium you'll often pay over the 12C. Unless you're just buying into it for the fact that you want a McLaren, every single thing about this that I can think of, gearbox, steering, throttle, interior, is improved, maybe in a small way, but often a meaningful one over the 12C. But most importantly, this has all been done without compromise. That's cough and hiccup, changing from first to second, that's weird. Incidentally, I also wish this had bigger paddles on. It's got the original small little mouse ears and they're just not big enough. On the whole, I cannot think of one single way where this is a worse car than the 12C. The 720S was a very compromised thing, in many ways a bit of a backward step for the brand. But the 650, I've absolutely no hesitation whatsoever in calling a masterpiece. It really, really is that good. If McLaren only ever made this and then faded into the night, I would still remember them somewhat fondly. And remember, I'm that guy that hates McLarens. So if I tell you to buy one of these, they must be good. Just do buy it with a warranty. That, I think, is enough from me for today. This has been a brilliant experience. Thanks to James for bringing his car out. Please like, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.